All right, our next speaker, as we're slowly coming back in, our next speaker, Joe Gregory, is the Assistant Manager of Davie Resource Group's Natural Resource Consulting Team. Oh, I am. I'm going to read it. Joe is a planner and an urban forester by training and has coordinated numerous municipal inventory projects throughout the United States. He has extensive experience with GIS and GPS technologies, several types of field data collection, computers, tree inventories, tree inventory management software, urban tree risk assessment, urban tree canopy analysis, and the iTree suite of software. He is proficient at writing urban and community forestry management plans, benefit analyses, and urban forest master plans for municipal and nonprofit clientele. Joe is a certified arborist and municipal specialist with the International Society of Arboriculture. Holds a Bachelor of Science degree in conservation from Kent State University, and a Master of Arts in Geography and Urban Planning from the University of Akron. He's going to be talking about the Cleveland Tree Plan and how public and private relationships can add value to community forestry initiatives. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here with all y'all. Let me get the slides fired up. So as Marilyn mentioned, I'm going to talk about the Cleveland Tree Plan. It's an urban forest master plan. It's a planning document for the city and its partners to all get pointed in the right direction. All the urban forestry that's happening in Cleveland right now was disjointed or not happening at all. So the need for a plan came about, and the Davie company won that contract to author the plan. I was the project manager. And that's how I came to met your president, Marilyn. Through those collaborations and partnerships that we went through with the plan, I got to meet with Marilyn, talk about Lakeview Cemetery, which is in Cleveland, and a really unique element of the urban forest for the city. So we got to be there. I think she's probably heard me talk about the Cleveland Tree Plan before and invited me to speak. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Now let me just see if I can do this. I was monkeying around with it earlier, and it's just a matter of plugging the cord.
Yeah, it is.
So I actually brought a couple copies of the plan I'm going to be talking about, just to get a sense of it. I'll pass it around. You guys can flip through it. If you have any questions about it, maybe I'll pop on in my talk. If not, after the talk, we can touch base. And then my lovely assistant in the back, Frank. He's going to be handing out. We brought another handout. So we at Davie tend to talk about trees and the benefits they provide to help advocate for the things urban forest managers or cemetery tree managers or park managers want to do with their trees. Oftentimes you have to make an economic call. And so at Davie we invest a lot of research and energy into the iTree suite of tools that was used to create a study for Lakeview. And I'll pass that around to everyone. That's something that if you have a forested cemetery, you could totally do in a matter of minutes with iTree software.
Jeff, you got another joke?
I got one.
All right, there we go.
I think it explains a lot of us that have to serve people, but there was this mom, and she had a child, and he wouldn't speak all the years. I mean, they had psychologists to doctors, and it just would not say a word, and nobody could explain why, and he just never did. But he about 10 years old, and one day, mother put his breakfast in front of him like always, and he said, "Don't feels cold." And she said, "Oh my goodness, you've spoken, what happened? How suddenly are you able to speak?" And he said, "Up to now, everything was okay."
Okay, back to you.
Back to you, thanks. So again, I'm going to talk about the Cleveland tree plan in a general sense. And my hope is that you'll be able to find the connections between the properties you manage and how folks in Cleveland, all different types of organizations, public and private, are starting to align themselves in the same direction to get things done. I'll also do my best to tie in specifically how cemeteries fit in with this plan or other plans we've worked on. But just to back up, provide a little more context, the Davey Tree Expert Company is based in Kent, Ohio. We're about 8,000 employees, and we were founded in 1880. And founder, John Davey, actually landed in Kent, Ohio, because he got a job as the caretaker for Standing Rock Cemetery in Kent. And so that's where he ended up doing some experimentation on mature tree care. He was a very scientific-minded person, and wrote all of his observations and his experiments down, and he eventually self-published a book called The Tree Doctor, in which gave him some local prominence as a tree expert, upon which he launched the Davey Expert Company in 1880, and today he paved the way for my role today. I've been with the company for 16 years, and one of my most exciting projects is the Cleveland Tree Plan, so I'll get into that here in a minute. But Dave has many divisions. I work for the consulting arm of the company, and in doing so, I've had the pleasure of working on cemeteries and for cemeteries across the entire country. We have done tree inventories, management plans, and provided tree data to the national cemeteries all across the country. We work with a lot of local cemeteries where we have offices, and I'm just now beginning to dive into our relationship with Lakeview Cemetery for the Cleveland Tree Plan. And so speaking of the plan and speaking of public-private partnerships, this is a laundry list. I don't think it's so important that you read every stakeholder, but to see all the groups that participated in the planning process. So in Cleveland, urban forestry is kind of a lower priority. There's a lot of economic hardships in Cleveland that require us to push trees a little bit further down the list. But there's all kinds of stakeholders and groups, public and private, that are really interested in trees and how tree benefits can help serve their needs, whether it's beautifying the community or reducing crime or improving public health or improving property values. Folks are starting to learn about the tree benefits. I'm sure at this conference you've heard talks on tree benefits in the past if you're a regular attending. And so what Cleveland does have uniquely is they have an urban tree canopy analysis. Their county got a grant, funded a GIS study of urban tree canopy. So we took aerial photography and exported out the layer that exists when looking down upon the county that is made up of tree cover. So that we call that urban tree canopy cover. That's really all they had. And it was at 19%, which is on par, pretty low compared to other Midwestern and Great Lakes region communities. They also have a real history behind an identity with being a forest city. They used to call themselves a forest city. We had a Forest City Baseball Club, Forest City Brewing, we had a Forest City Bank, Forest City Railway Company. All those things are gone. I grew up in Cleveland my whole life. It wasn't until I started becoming an arborist and interested in that where I learned of the identity of Forest City and how it is a bygone era in Cleveland. What they do have is a robust sustainability movement. So at the city level, they have an Office of Sustainability. And those folks started thinking about what trees can do to advance their initiatives around sustainability. So they commissioned a plan. The other thing Cleveland's dealing with, and one of the things we're looking at trees for, is climate change. And rising average temperatures, longer freeze season, more rain, and with that more rain, there's more heavy rain, more extreme rain events. And so when you consider what that means to the community, you're talking about heat waves that are public health risks. There's paycheck issues. People have to pay higher utility bills when it's hotter out. There's water quality issues. We've probably all seen in the news, being Ohioans, the algal blooms in Lake Erie that affected Toledo. Those are concerns in Cleveland. There's beach closings along the shore. Those are all water quality issues based on heavy rains with surface runoff. And so these numbers up here represent the percent of increase that is projected as a result of the climate change. And so when we talk about the plan, we're talking about what can trees do to combat this. And the city, while they have that vision, they can't do everything they need to do alone. They can't plant more trees. They have barely enough money to plant, prune or remove the ones that need to come out. So when I got involved, we really focused on the process. And that's something that could apply to a city, a county, or a single park. And so there lies what I think is most relevant about this plan, is the process we took. And we essentially tried to characterize the state of the urban forest, and just like the state of the union. So what do we have? And what do we want? How are we going to get there? And how are we going to monitor them? That's the process. This map, by the way, is an image of the land cover analysis, or the urban tree canopy cover analysis digitally. So if your community has one, and there are several in Ohio that have access to this data, there's no reason you can't flip out the neighborhood or your cemetery, try to learn what the land cover classes are. When we do these analyses, you look at, and the different classes are probably hard to read, but you look at the light green is grass, the brown is bare soil, the darker green is canopy cover. And that's what we're interested in, because canopy cover drives the amount of benefits. So if we want more benefits from trees, if we want improved air quality or improved stormwater reduction benefits from trees, then we have to increase canopy. So that's what the plan's all about. Perhaps, though, even more so, it's about promoting deep collaboration. As I've mentioned a couple times already, there's just no way the city can lead all these efforts on their own. There are things that some of the universities in Cleveland, or Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland, would be like to be doing to manage their urban forest more, and they just can't do it without pooling their resources and pointing in that right direction. So this plan offered that opportunity for everybody to get some input. We took all that laundry list of stakeholders, and this is the process we came up with. It's pretty simple, but I think it's pretty powerful too. And it starts at the top, where it asks, so what do we have? What do we have? So we have, as I mentioned, 19% canopy cover. We don't know a whole lot more about what we have. We have a historical connection to being a forest city. What do we want is a lot easier to answer. And in planning meetings with all those stakeholder groups, we asked that question and framed it in terms of the right side of the slide. So the right side of the slide, there's 3 areas called our trees, our approach, our players. And what that means is, well, what do we want our trees to be and look like? What do we want our players or our stakeholders or the groups that are interested in managing the urban forest, what do we want them to look like? How do we want them to interact? And our approach essentially means our management approach. How do we want to manage them? What level of service do we want to offer? So we framed all of our answers into one of those 3 categories. And then the plan tells us how we get there and offers us an opportunity to monitor how we're doing. And that's just cyclical. So once we monitor how we're doing, we can start all over again. Well, what do we have now? How 2 years later, since the plan's been released, what kind of progress have we made? So a simple plan that I would apply to any size parcel that we were providing a plan for. what do we want is, in Cleveland, ended up being more of a question of what don't we want. So this is an aerial image of Cleveland, and you can more or less pick out where the city boundaries come in, starts and ends, just based on the amount of gray, if you will, or the lack of canopy. And so if this is a rough, but this is the city outline of Cleveland, and this is a color-coded map of the extended canopy. And when you look at them in comparison, you can pretty much line up, or even when you're driving from out of town, from the suburbs, you know when you're in Cleveland, there's less canopy. So that's what they didn't want. They didn't want to be able to pick out the city boundary of Cleveland from Google Maps. Should be a little harder than that. And they wanted to increase benefits. What do they want? We want to increase benefits. This is a laundry list of benefits, and they go pretty deep in terms of air quality improvements, water quality improvements, soil structural improvements, the impacts on carbon sequestration that help the climate, wildlife benefits, some of which we can quantify and put in terms of dollars. And this slide should say economic benefits of trees, because these are all dollars and cents benefits of trees. We can at Davie talk about the impact of a well-placed landscape tree in terms of its increased potential for real estate value. We can model the shade of a shade tree on a home in terms of the impact on decreased energy costs. The less you have to heat or cool the building translates into a benefit directly to people's paychecks, but also indirectly on the amount collectively when you look at urban forest the size of Cleveland on the energy demands at the fossil fuel plant. Wind shielding and direct shading of buildings are really big ones. It's twofold, just to be clear. Shading is an obvious benefit, but when you put trees next to air-conditioned buildings, they also break up the wind, they slow down the wind, and that may actually be the bigger benefit. It's harder to realize, harder to measure, but folks are studying what that benefit is. And wind shielding in buildings is really big. There's studies out there about enhancing retail and office spaces, energy production, forest products, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But these are all economic values of the urban forest that make communities a competitive place to live. And then there's the social aspect. So again, whether that's public health, public safety, when we're talking about cemeteries, we can certainly connect with the idea of emotional or spiritual health and the enriched experience folks have when they're connecting to nature. And there's a lot of education opportunities. So when we model the benefits that we can put a dollar value on in Cleveland, so we know we have 19% canopy. 19% of the city is covered by trees' leaves. When we model that out, these are the benefits. And it essentially amounts to annual benefits of $28 million, and then an extra $53 million in stored carbon. So there's a value in processing carbon out of the air. And as trees grow and synthesize carbon dioxide, they keep that carbon, put out oxygen, right? Everybody can relate to that benefit. Well, that carbon that they keep, there's a value to it, albeit temporary. So when they die and we cut them down, they decay and it gets released. But if we cut all of our trees down all at once, we're going to have this economic impact in terms of the carbon that gets released into the atmosphere. So that's where we start to model these benefits. We're talking stormwater, energy, property values, human health benefits, which are really related to air quality. So when you impact air quality, you improve it, you take pollutants out, like carbon monoxide, ozone. Tree canopies do that. When you do that, people breathe easier, and there's actually an indirect health benefit on people who have respiratory illness being hospitalized less. So there's all these connections that we can make pretty convincing scientific arguments, no matter what audience we're talking to, as to why they might care about trees in their community or for their project or whatever the case may be. And we made that case in the plan here. And the numbers are, honestly, I don't know if you think they're big or small. I think they're kind of small for the city size of Cleveland. You could do a lot better things. And that's really essentially what the plan's all about. That's setting a goal to get more benefits out to the people who live there. Problem is, we're not going to get more benefits on our own. We've also modeled canopy's trend. And when we looked at, this is a graph showing canopy cover, this is 20%, and these are years starting from 2000 to 2040, so out to the future. Now, obviously, we can only look at real data from present and past, but when we looked at the canopy cover of the city from 2000 to 2013, it's on a downward trend where they're losing trees. Anybody have an idea why? There's a guess to why? Ash borer is a big one. There's also a major housing crisis in Cleveland. And so when they demolish those abandoned homes, they also knock down the trees. And there's not a lot of, Cleveland's built out, so there's not exactly a lot of development impacting forested areas, but there's not a lot of tree planting activity going on either. There's not a lot of tree care going on. Because folks are not managing their trees because they have other economic priorities. So you can get a little bit of decline there. But emerald ash borer we think is the biggest one. Anyway, when we project that trend out to the future, by 2040, which is a scale for the cities worried about climate change, what those impacts were. When I was first talking about those rising temperatures and those increased rainfalls, from year to year, we can speculate on how big of a deal that is. But when you look out 50 years, 40 years, those changes are magnified. So that's why Cleveland's looking at 2040, and their canopy is going to do less work for them. At that same time, the trees are becoming more important. So there's our sense of urgency around why. What we want is we want to reverse this trend. So benefits, dollars and cents, obviously an easy way to talk to folks who might not, or easier way to talk to folks who might not care about trees. But when you're talking about the city, maybe up until this point in my talk, it's like, wow, that's big. I don't know if I care about the city of Cleveland. So what we tried to do with the plan is break it down by neighborhood. And we can break it down even smaller. So we model the benefits between each identifiable neighborhood in Cleveland. What you see here is the green have the least amount of benefits. Probably not a good color to match up, but pink actually are the neighborhoods that are experiencing the most benefits. So this starts to help us look at, well, where do we really need to focus our energies? What groups do we need to get involved and where? Because businesses, institutions, nonprofits tend to only care about their neighborhood that they work in. So we made it relevant there. And we've also looked at, on a neighborhood level, where the need is greatest. So we know where the benefits are. This is a direct correlation to where the candidate is. We also looked at where the need is. So this is an equity index, and you can run this a couple of different ways, but we chose to look at it by population density, median income, and I think graduation rate or something like that. And so when we combine those three metrics into an average amount, we're saying, well, where the people make the least money and are the most dense and have the least education, they tend to have the least means or opportunities to understand the benefits of trees and maybe plant one for themselves or even deal with that in their daily lives. So that's where the need for benefits would be greatest. So when you start comparing where the benefits are and where the need is, some are matched up pretty well, but some are very disparate, and that's inequitable, and that's a concern. So we looked at that. And then we tried to just really break it down and understand what the state of the urban forest is. So what do we have and what do we want is summarized on this slide. And in terms of this slide, there's 25 indicators of what one would look at to see how sustainable the urban forest is. Remember, I talked about the trees, the players, and the management approach. Well, each of those has subcategories, and it's pretty technical stuff. But for example, for the trees, how much canopy cover do we have? 19%, right? That's low. That's a performance level considered to be low. That's what we have. Where we want to be is good. And so we know we want to move all these things to good. And the plan and all the partners need to talk about how do we get that to good? How do we move our tree canopy from low to good? How do we increase tree? How do we impact the way our utility companies are engaged with the community from low to good? Because if you're in my business, what you hear almost all the time is, man, those utility companies really did a hack job on those trees. And there's just a disconnect between understanding what that industry needs to do to deliver energy safely and reliably to people versus what it ends up looking like. What kind of right trees for the right place should be planted, all these different things. There's just a lack of understanding. Funding, that's obviously the elephant in the room, that's the biggest issue. Funding is low. We identified that as the state of the urban forest metric. How do we move that? And so that then the plan starts to tackle that. How do we get there? Well, we set a vision. This is the plan's vision. And it's just a basic vision. It's for a healthy urban forest now and in the future, to increase tree canopy, to ensure that everyone in Cleveland gets to benefit from that, to leverage the economic advantage of urban trees, and to use trees as an effective tool of neighborhood revitalization. Now, at the city school scale, this makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of groups in each neighborhood that can grasp onto this vision. But I think this vision also applies to, or could also apply to any park or any cemetery or any institutional property. These are some common things that folks that have and manage trees for the greater public good or for the benefit of their constituents, these are things you'd want to do. But the key piece is, the only way they're going to do it is through partnership. There's just no way any single entity can get any of this done. So, I've written a lot of plans, and this one has the least amount of goals that we ever put forth, because Cleveland's in a compromised situation. Things are not looking good. I'm not painting a pretty picture. And that's because the culture and the funding and the engagement is just so low. So we try to break it down as best we could and really set a goal, number one, about culture change, a fundamental shift in thinking about the subject of urban trees. Why do we want trees? Hopefully I'm making that case. Why don't we have them? Why aren't we maintaining them? It's all economics. It's all money, different priorities. This thing happened, and the next thing happened, and we were a forest city, and then Dutch elm disease killed all our trees, and then all the steel companies left, and then nobody could pay for trees, and then emerald ash borer is killing them now. We just have other things we need to worry about. Fair enough, those are all valid arguments. But I think we're also making arguments on the other side that we want to reverse the trend of canopy laws for the benefits. And then if we're going to do that, we need to take care of these trees. So goals 2 and 3 kind of go hand in hand. And it's a basic, simple document for anybody to jump on board with. Let's figure this out. So these are the action steps, and there's just 9 of them. These are the top priorities for the City of Cleveland and its partners. It's nonprofits, it's cemeteries, it's institutions to get behind and start figuring out how they can help. I'll go through a couple. But, in the plan, there's action sheets just to kind of bring us back to this process. We're now at how did we get there and how are we doing? To monitor that, we created action sheets. I think we created one for every action, each of the 9 actions. I think if you grab those off the internet, there might be some real applicability there to your property that you're managing if you manage trees. Pretty universal concepts. The one I think Marilyn was most interested in me talking about was this one. This establish a unified voice, formalize partnerships. And I've mentioned this a couple times, culture change. We need to make trees in Cleveland a lot more important, and we need to tell folks why. We need to help educate them and get them engaged. I mean, everybody loves trees on some level, and everybody hates trees on some level. So in Cleveland right now, those levels are skewed. And getting this unified voice means getting the stakeholders together and forming a group that can be that voice. Push all those messages out to our different areas that we touch. If I'm a community development corporation, I'm operating in my neighborhood, I can touch the people who live in that neighborhood, I can talk about trees, and I can get that information as talking points, and I can connect what the city's doing if I'm a part of this unified voice. If I'm Lakeview Cemetery, I can get my message out that we're one of the most valuable and unique places in all of Cleveland, and you should come check it out and perhaps consider donating to us. How great. And there's just opportunities that are going to be flowing from that. I could give many examples. Another recommended action would be develop outreach and education. So that's really it. If you're going to change the culture, you got to start with education and outreach. You got to go out and touch people, talk to them about trees, plant a tree, have fun with it. I mean, as cemetery managers, I'm sure that you run into folks really being passionate about having this type of tree, near a plot, or having a cemetery that's beautiful because of its trees. And there are opportunities for the cemeteries and other parks in Cleveland to be a part of this outreach and education strategy. Bring folks into their world there on your property and talk about trees. I know many of you probably do tree walks or consider doing tree walks or other things before culture to engage the public. But this plan really builds in a lot of opportunities for cemeteries in Cleveland to jump on board. You don't have to think so hard about, well, what do we do? And are we doing what we should be doing? It's all right there. And there's many organizations that are willing to help out. Another big one for this particular plan is establishing a canopy goal. Really drawing a line in the sand saying, hey, we want to reverse this trend. Here's where we want to be. And so I've continued to work with the committee on establishing a canopy goal. And in Cleveland, we're going to set a 30% canopy goal by 2040. And the reason we're going to set that is because when we quantify the benefits of trees at 30%, it's more in line with what we want to get out of our trees. It's not just a simple, oh, we love trees and we want more of them. It's, well, we're projected to grow at this rate or decline at this rate. Climate change is happening. All these things that trees can help impact. We need to receive benefits. This is what we need out of our trees. We need to receive benefits at the rate of $45 million a year. And so that ends up being 30% guarantee. And as I sort of teased a little bit, plant with a purpose. We're not advocating to go out and plant more trees because we need more trees and that's it. Plant and walk away. To plant whatever you want, who cares? I don't know, one more trees is going to be that good no matter what. That is not the case. We want folks in Cleveland and all the institutions and anyone who might plant a tree to be able to answer the question, well, why am I planting this tree? What is the purpose of it? It could be that I just simply want to beautify the property, but it could also be that I want to reduce my energy bills, or I want to extend the life of my pavement by shading it longer, or I want to reduce the gray infrastructure I have to deal with for stormwater on this project by having green infrastructure and tree canopy on it. It could be that I want to have a lasting legacy to remember, this moment. Whatever it is, what is the real reason? And some of these reasons can be focused around different neighborhoods. So on the same theme, looking at neighborhoods, this map, it shows heat island index. Shading helps improve heat island. Cleveland's an urban community, a lot of pavement, a lot of buildings. Heat island means that in those environments, the temperature's higher than out in the suburbs, just because of the reflection of the sun and the absorption of the warmth of the sun. So in urban areas, you have hotter cities, and in certain neighborhoods, they're hotter than others. And those folks need more canopy to reduce urban heat island effect. This is a map of stormwater need. This is a map of basically the stormwater retention by neighborhood, where light blue is low priority, dark blue is high priority. Trees impact stormwater by intercepting rain and during the heaviest rainfalls and delaying how fast it hits the ground. So when a heavy rainstorm hits, a certain amount of gallons of stormwater get tied up in the canopy of trees, and that's less pressure on the sewer system and the combined sewer overflow system to handle all at once. They get to delay that. Some of that first rush of water gets processed, and then it comes down. So that's a huge benefit. And this is the dark blue areas are the areas where we need trees, because folks' basements are flooding, and these are issues from a public health standpoint and a water quality standpoint. So cemeteries fit in, I think, in many, many ways. But obviously they're sanctuaries for the dead, for wildlife, but also for trees. And I wonder how often we promote them. There's definitely less development pressure than on public spaces and parks, so there's opportunities to do more unique things in cemeteries with the urban forest. There might be an opportunity to have a more unique urban forest environment, or a different type of tour, or a different type of tourism. They're often run by nonprofits, which make great partners, because nonprofits can be a lot more flexible in terms of what direction they go, how they can attract funding, and what they do with that money. And of course, as many of you, or perhaps all of you know, they're enjoyed by a few adventurous members of the public as green spaces, and I think that should increase, certainly with cemeteries in Cleveland. This little excerpt, I forget where I got it, but it's one of the rules and regulations from a local cemetery. All persons are prohibited from gathering in flowers either wild or cultivated, or community tree shrub. I mean, that to me just speaks of the culture and the value of the urban forest, community, green infrastructure in a cemetery. So here's a couple shots that's well aware of wildlife benefits. Here's Lakeview Cemetery's canopy. So as I mentioned, I've been talking about Cleveland, but if we just talk about Lakeview, we're just starting to work with. We have about 200 acres, 62% of which are covered by trees. And in comparison, that one piece of property accounts for 1.8% of all Cleveland's canopy, or ergo 1.8% of all their benefits. And if we just look at these benefits from a stormwater and air quality standpoint, that's $95,000 a year. What that means is if this property wasn't there, then the cost to society to deal with stormwater infrastructure, sewer pipes, things like this, air scrubbers or the public health impact on increased air pollution will be estimated to cost society about $95,000 a year. And then there's some big trees in Lakeview, so they're storing a lot of carbon, about $780,000 in terms of the value of what it takes to clean carbon. So back to the actions, establishing a unified voice partnership. The way they've done that in Cleveland is they established a Cleveland Tree Coalition. Cemeteries, universities, other nonprofits, Dave Tree, private companies, individuals are all encouraged to join this coalition, join a subcommittee, and start implementing the plan's actions. Many hands make light work, and since the plan got published 2 years ago, we've been able to attract through all those partnerships $700,000 and $800,000 in terms of projects and tree planting. And so when you take it collectively, just like when you look at the urban forest collectively, you're talking about a big deal in terms of benefits. When you get everybody pointed in the right direction, on a goal, you can really leverage your investments, your ability to bring in grant funding, your ability to get the private sector to mobilize for your cause, things like that. So we've gotten some great grants from American Forest, from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and from a local foundation. The big grant is this $500,000 grant from the Cleveland Foundation to help work on policies on tree preservation and tree protection, and help develop a workforce, a youth workforce program to help take care of these trees we're going to plant. From an outreach and education strategy standpoint, I thought I'd share this unique fundraiser that I got exposed to working with another community. Pittsburgh has a cemetery called Allegheny Cemetery, and they've got hit, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago by a pretty bad thunderstorm, maybe microburst even, and they put on this nonprofit called Unearth. They lost a lot of trees in that storm, and so obviously there's a great cost to getting those trees removed, but what they allowed is the local artist community to come in and harvest some of that wood so that they could start to make artwork. So this is still just shots of a local sawyer or logger who's interested in urban wood and making pieces of art or functional furniture from it. And what they did was they took that wood, they held an art show, and folks bid on this work, and it all went to Allegheny Cemetery to help pay for the cost of the tree removal and the cost of the tree restoration planting. And like Cleveland, Pittsburgh has a tree master plan, which facilitated an opportunity like this to get everybody kind of supporting each other and pull something like this off. So here's just a unique piece of functional furniture, functional, I don't know, maybe, but this it comes from these rails back to this big tree. And folks just really had this opportunity to behold the work of a local artist, draw a connection to the historical cemetery that's in their neighborhood, and then also you can't help but learn about the importance of trees and make the connections. So I'll leave you with a couple more things. In terms of what we do at Davie, we try to preach increasing value, and in landscape management that means increasing assets, decreasing their liabilities, which essentially means assets as trees, at least in my world. And cemeteries are some of the highest valued assets, but you also can get some of the highest valued liabilities. So if you're a cemetery in Cleveland, or you're a cemetery anywhere else where a plan like this can help you, then there's fundraising opportunities, there's that many hands make light work approach that can get after some of these problems or challenges you're working on. And in my work with Maryland so far, we've been able to do that. So, Lakeview Cemetery commissioned Davie to come and do an assessment of the highest risk trees. And we did that in about 2 weeks, just canvassed and looked at every tree, reported the ones that we think are the highest need, delivered the cemetery's board a tree inventory workbook that they're now talking about, what are we going to do, how are we going to tackle this problem. So Lakeview being a part of this Cleveland Tree Coalition has it on everybody's radar what this property means to the city and what they can do to help. Okay, last point here, plan with a purpose. It's maybe the concept I want to put forward most. Anybody planting a tree, I always say, well, what's the reason you're planting a tree? And that message is being well received behind this plan. We're getting city and county land banks. We're dealing with these vacant lots in Cleveland to start reforesting vacant lots. It says vacation lots, but I should just say vacant lots. Because there's a huge opportunity there to increase trees on this land that's being set out. Community development corporations are planting trees to increase community engagement. Our sewer districts are planting trees to improve stormwater. Instead of building underground pipes, they're also implementing green infrastructure. Corporations are connecting their own sustainability movements in Cleveland to planting trees on their property and getting involved. Schools are expanding their celebrations of Arbor Day. And so there's really a lot happening in Cleveland in the wake of this plan. If any of you ever come to Cleveland, I'd be happy to tour you around some of the some of the projects we're working on. Hopefully, you can draw some of the connections to your daily work, and it's been a pleasure talking to you guys about the plan, and hope to chat with you afterwards. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Greg?
Well, if you think of one later, there's my email. Everybody's welcome to email me. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
to talk about it.
So, Joe said a little bit about what's happening at Lakeview. So, we are a stakeholder in this plan. We're still in the infancy of the plan, and we're really trying to figure out what we can do and where we need to do it and all that. So, some of the things that we're doing to help with the whole Cleveland Tree Plan is we're actually hosting workshops on our property. So we've had people that are interested in trees and whatever come to learn for 2-evening workshops. They also come and plant trees. So a benefit to Lakeview, we got a handful of free trees and free labor of putting the trees in. Obviously, they work with us to find the locations and pick the right trees for the locations and all that. So that's a plus, obviously. So at this point, Lakeview is kind of being almost like a guinea pig. So we're being the workshop, the area that education can move on into the bigger picture